There's this universally frustrating human experience, and I am almost certain you, listening right now, have either lived through it or, well, watched someone you care about go through it.
Oh, absolutely. It is incredibly common.
Right. It starts like this. You find yourself in a situation that is completely draining. Let's say it is a romantic dynamic. It is toxic. It is exhausting. And finally, you summon the courage to pack your bags and leave.
Which takes a massive amount of energy.
Exactly. You do the internal work, you process the separation, and after a passage of eras, or just what feels like a really significant block of time, you meet someone entirely new.
A completely clean slate, right?
Yeah, exactly. Different background, different appearance, a completely different initial resonance. And yet, somehow, as time ticks by, you wake up one Tuesday morning and realize you are having the exact same argument,
Yes.
with the exact same emotional volatility, just with a new face sitting across the kitchen table.
It is a profound, almost dizzying realization when that happens. And the fascinating thing is that it is absolutely not limited to romantic entanglements. We see this exact dynamic play out in professional environments constantly.
Yes, you quit the job where your manager was constantly undermining you,
Yeah.
right? You polished a resume, you absolutely crushed the interviews, you might even switch entire industries just to ensure you are safe.
Because you think the industry is the problem.
Right. So you walk into this pristine new office environment, and within a mere fragment of a business cycle, you discover your newly appointed manager is operating on the exact same frequency of disrespect.
It is like clockwork.
It really is. You are left standing there, feeling like you are trapped in an invisible, infinitely repeating loop. You are reading the literature, you are grinding, you are physically relocating your entire life to different cities, and yet this invisible tether just snaps you right back to the starting point.
Which inevitably leads to that one question.
Yes, the ultimate agonizing question. Why does this always happen to me?
Why does this always happen to me? That question is the absolute perfect starting point for our inquiry today, because the fundamental assumption built into that question is that we are simply victims of a random, chaotic external world.
We think we just have terrible luck.
Exactly. We believe circumstance is simply happening to us. But our objective in this audio exploration is to completely dismantle that assumption. We have compiled a fascinating stack of research covering neurobiology, behavioral psychology, quantum biophysics, and cellular mechanics.
This is a massive amount of data.
It is. And the mission today is to reveal the invisible architecture of human reality based on this data. We are going to demonstrate that the external world, the repeating toxic managers, the identical relationship dynamics, is not a random series of events.
So what is it then?
It is a precise, mechanical, and unbroken reflection of an internal energetic frequency.
I love that we're taking this approach.
Yeah.
Because telling someone that their string of terrible experiences is actually a reflection of their internal frequency is, well, it's a massive paradigm shift.
It can be a very uncomfortable truth to hear.
Oh, definitely. To the uninitiated, it can sound almost like ancient mysticism or wishful thinking. But we are not talking about philosophy today. We are looking at the cold, hard mechanics of human energy and cellular biology.
They're the literal physics of how our internal neurological landscape dictates physical reality.
Exactly. So I want to invite you, the listener, to hold your own recurring life patterns in your mind's eye as we unpack this. Think about that one frustration that keeps shadowing you, because the mechanics we are about to outline explain the exact biological reasons why it is there.
To understand the architecture of this repeating loop, we really have to begin by examining the staggering disparity in our neural processing. We walk around with this profound illusion of control.
But we love to think we're in charge.
We genuinely believe our conscious thoughts, our daily decisions, our sheer willpower are the dominant forces dictating our trajectory. We believe that because we consciously desire a healthy, respectful relationship, our conscious mind is running the navigation system.
Right. We assume the thought, I want a fulfilling career, is the captain of the ship. We think that intention is the loudest voice in the room.
Precisely. But when we look at the actual neurological processing capacity of the human system, the conscious mind is incredibly limited.
How limited are we talking?
Well, if we measure the sheer magnitude of data it can handle in any given moment, the conscious mind represents a mere fragment of our total computational power. It is highly advanced, yes, but in terms of bandwidth, It is like a solitary spark in the vast darkness.
A solitary spark.
Okay. Meanwhile, our subconscious programming operating entirely beneath our active awareness is processing a staggering, almost incomprehensible magnitude of information simultaneously.
So it's not a spark.
No, the subconscious is not a solitary spark. It is a roaring river of automated algorithms. It is an endless tide.
A solitary spark versus an endless tide. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the sheer imbalance of power there. So we are sitting here using our highly evolved but incredibly narrow solitary spark to say, I'm going to find a respectful partner.
While the endless tide of your nervous system is managing a completely different agenda.
Exactly. What kind of agenda is it running?
The endless tide is managing the vast constellation of automated programs you have acquired throughout your existence. It is running your biology, regulating your cardiovascular rhythm, but crucially, it is also running your deeply ingrained neural pathways regarding who you are, what is safe, and what you deserve.
Now, for an audience that understands the basics of psychology, the classic analogy here is usually driving a car on autopilot, right? Where you arrive at your destination and don't remember the drive.
Yes, the classic highway hypnosis.
We all know that feeling of the subconscious taking the wheel.
Yeah.
But let's elevate that. Let's look at the actual biological friction happening when we try to change our lives.
That is where the real struggle happens.
Because if the conscious mind, this solitary spark, is handling such a minuscule fragment of our processing power, why do we feel so physically and mentally devastated at the end of the day just from overthinking? If the prefrontal cortex is just a spark, why does using it drain our entire battery?
That is the critical question. The profound exhaustion you feel is not because the conscious mind is doing heavy lifting in terms of raw data processing.
It isn't?
No. The exhaustion is a biological phenomenon. The drain comes entirely from the intense friction of the solitary spark actively fighting against the massive established current of the endless tide.
The friction between the two systems. Okay, explain the mechanics of that friction for us.
Think about the neural pathways in your brain as physical rivers. Over the passage of eras in your life, your subconscious tide has carved deep, wide, incredibly efficient neurohighways.
Like canyons of habit.
Precisely. Let's say you have a deeply ingrained program, perhaps an identity formed early on that believes vulnerability is inherently dangerous. That is a wide, fast-flowing river in your limbic system.
So the water naturally wants to rush down that specific path.
Exactly. Now your conscious spark decides, I am going to force myself to be vulnerable and trust this new person.
So you are trying to route water out of the Grand Canyon and force it up a tiny unpaved hill.
That is biologically what is happening. You are using your tiny conscious processing power to chemically and electrically battle against a roaring river of established neurological wiring.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. The prefrontal cortex is an energy-hungry region of the brain. When it has to constantly suppress the automated responses, it consumes an immense magnitude of metabolic resources. You are swimming upstream against a torrent of your own neural architecture.
So it's basically an unwinnable war of attrition.
Yes. The sheer overwhelming metabolic effort of trying to override your automated identity with sheer willpower is what depletes your energy reserves, leaving you exhausted by 2 in the afternoon.
So for the person stuck in the repeating loop of toxic jobs or bad relationships, what this means is they are trying to fix an endless tide problem using only a solitary spark.
They are completely mismatched in their approach.
They change their wardrobe, they change their zip code, they change their industry. But the automated program running the internal navigation system hasn't been touched at all.
Correct. The destination is strictly pre-programmed into the nervous system, regardless of the cosmetic route the conscious mind attempts to take.
Which naturally brings us to the origin point of this entire dilemma.
Yeah.
If the endless tide is dictating our reality, how did it get programmed to these specific destinations in the first place?
We have to look at our beginnings.
Right, because nobody consciously chooses to sit down and program their nervous system with a belief that they deserve terrible treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So when is this foundational coding actually written?
It is written during the dawn of our cycle. In the earliest phases of human development, we operate in a neurological state that is completely devoid of the analytical filter we possess as adults.
We don't have that critical firewall yet.
Exactly. The conscious mind, that solitary spark of logic, has not yet fully formed. The brain waves of a young human operate at a much lower, more hypnotic frequency.
Like a constant state of recording.
Yes. During this extended dawn of our cycle, we are essentially existing in a state of continuous neuroplastic absorption. We are wide open. We absorb every behavioral pattern, every unspoken anxiety, and every micro-reaction to build our baseline identity.
We are just downloading the environmental data directly to the hard drive. There's no critical faculty saying, wait, my caregiver's projecting their own trauma right now. I shouldn't internalize this.
We simply absorb it as the absolute law of survival. And the reason we do this is not an evolutionary accident. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable biological imperative.
The need to belong.
Exactly. At a cellular and systemic level, isolated life cannot survive. There is an absolute overriding biological command built into our physical makeup. We must belong to a collective, to a community.
Because to be separated from the community, especially in the dawn of our existence, means certain biological peril.
It equals death.
I think this is where a lot of modern self-improvement misses the mark. We assume our primary biological directive is to be happy, or to be our authentic selves.
But the nervous system doesn't care about your self-actualization.
Exactly. It only cares about your survival. And survival means belonging to the herd.
That is the absolute core of human behavioral mechanics. To illustrate the raw, visceral power of this imperative, let us observe the dynamics of the equine discipline.
Oh, the equine observation. When I first encountered this in the research, it completely reframed how I view human anxiety. Walk us through how the herd enforces this belonging.
If you observe a vast landscape with a herd of wild horses moving together, the mechanics of survival are highly calibrated. Within this herd, imagine a young colt becomes dangerously unruly.
Acting out, being disruptive.
Right. It is running erratically, perhaps jeopardizing the safety or the stealth of the entire collective. Now, observe the discipline administered by the mature horses. They do not typically resort to physical violence to teach the youth a lesson.
What do they do instead?
The ultimate, most terrifying enforcement mechanism they utilize is to systematically push the erratic youth out of the herd.
They exile it. They utilize the environment itself as the threat.
Yes. They turn their backs and create a physical boundary. Every time the colt tries to approach the perimeter of the herd to rejoin the warmth and safety, the adults step forward and drive it away.
Wow, that is brutal.
They enforce total physical and emotional isolation. Out on the plains alone, the colt faces the absolute terror of its vulnerability. Predators, exposure, starvation. The biological imperative within the colt screams that isolation equals death.
And so, what is the inevitable result?
The youth abandons its rebellious behavior entirely. It submits. It conforms immediately and completely to the unspoken rules and rhythms of the collective, simply to be allowed back into the safety of the herd.
It literally trades its authentic impulse for the security of belonging, because authenticity without the herd means death.
Precisely. Now map this directly onto human neurological development. During the dawn of our cycle, our primary caregivers represent our entire herd. Their approval, their attention, and their regulation are our absolute lifelines.
So if our authentic, energetic self, our natural exuberance, or our raw emotional needs threatens our standing in that family unit, we experience that exact same primal terror of isolation.
The nervous system registers a drop in approval as a literal threat to our biological survival.
And this is where the neural pathways get carved. If a child's natural enthusiasm is consistently met with irritation, the child's brain doesn't possess the critical thinking to analyze the parent, right?
It can't say, oh, my caregivers lack emotional regulation skills.
Right. The child's nervous system instantly calculates. My authenticity threatens my survival. I must adapt my baseline frequency.
And that adaptation becomes the permanent automated program. To avoid the perceived peril of losing our caregiver's connection, we abandon our original energetic signature. We become highly adept at studying the herd.
We adopt their exact frequency.
Yes. If our specific herd operates on a baseline frequency of high anxiety, we adopt hypervigilance as our baseline. If the herd operates on a deeply embedded belief system of scarcity and struggle, we encode scarcity directly into our nervous system.
We take on the stress responses, the avoidance tactics, and the limiting beliefs of our environment.
And this deeply compromised adaptation becomes our fixed identity. It becomes the endless tide.
And here's the tragic irony. This circles right back to the person trapped in the loop of bad bosses and toxic partners. We hit our adult years, we look at our family dynamics, and our conscious mind says, I am nothing like them. I am moving to a completely different coast.
We use our solitary spark of conscious intent to physically relocate.
But because the herd's programming is literally encoded into our neurobiology, into our vagal tone, our baseline cortisol levels, we carry the exact culture of the original herd within us.
You cannot outrun your own autonomic nervous system. It travels with you.
So we arrive in the shiny new city, we walk into the new corporate office, and what does the endless tide do? We subconsciously, magnetically seek out people and structural dynamics that perfectly match the frequency of the original herd.
We recreate the exact same power dynamics, just with new faces.
We find the boss who makes us feel exactly as inadequate as our early environment did, because our subconscious recognizes that specific dynamic as home. It recognizes it as safe, not in a healthy way, but in a familiar, survivable way.
That is a critical distinction. The subconscious nervous system does not possess a moral compass that judges whether a program is joyful or miserable. It only possesses an algorithm that judges whether a pattern is familiar.
Because familiarity equals predictability.
And predictability equals survival. So it perfectly orchestrates the continuous replication of your foundational environment.
Which is mind-blowing.
It is. And this realization requires a profound pivot in how we understand the architecture of our reality. Up until this point in our discussion, we have been looking at this through the lens of psychology and neurobiology.
But to truly understand the mechanics of the repeating loop, we have to shift our perspective into the realm of physics.
Yes, this is the transition that completely reframes the entire human experience.
Because we have established that our psychology dictates our behavior. But the research we are analyzing today takes it a monumental step further. It states that the architecture of this repeating loop is actually grounded in the fundamental nature of matter itself.
To grasp this, we must actively dismantle the most persistent, convincing illusion of the human sensory experience, the illusion of solid matter.
Right, because things feel solid.
You perceive your physical body as a solid mass. You perceive the chair you are sitting on as a solid, static object. But if we utilize the principles of quantum mechanics to break down the architecture of matter to its absolute foundational truth, the concept of solidity completely vanishes.
So it's actually there.
You are comprised of an endless ocean of atoms. And an atom is not a hard, static, microscopic marble. An atom is entirely fundamentally energetic.
Right. I want to make sure we don't just brush past this with, elementary school science.
Yeah.
Because an advanced audience knows atoms are mostly empty space.
Yeah.
But let's visualize what that actually means for human biophysics. If I am not solid bone and tissue, what exactly am I?
We have to visualize the atom not as a tiny particle, but as a microscopic tornado.
Tornado. I like that visual.
It is a highly complex vortex of energy, continuously spinning, continuously vibrating, and continuously sending out tangible ripples and waves of electromagnetic force into the space surrounding it.
A microscopic tornado of concentrated energy. Now, multiply that solitary tornado by a vast, incomprehensible constellation. We're talking about trillions upon trillions of these energetic vortices.
All bound together by electromagnetic attraction, communicating with one another to form the temporary illusion of your physical form.
So if you are comprised entirely of these dynamic vibrating tornadoes, you are not a solid object moving through an empty world. You are quite literally a massive ocean of interacting frequencies.
You are a walking, talking electromagnetic field.
What does that physiological reality mean for my abstract thoughts? What mechanically happens in that field when I have a deeply held emotion?
Every single thought you generate, every deeply ingrained subconscious belief has a specific, measurable electrical and magnetic signature.
Really? Measurable?
Yes. When you experience an emotion, it acts exactly like a heavy stone dropped into the center of that energetic ocean. When the stone breaks the surface, it does not just sit there in localized isolation within your brain.
It sends out ripples.
It displaces the energy, sending out tangible, measurable electromagnetic ripples that travel outward in every direction through your body and beyond your skin.
I really want to emphasize the beyond your skin part. Because we're not speaking metaphorically here, right?
Not at all. Instruments can physically measure the magnetic field generated by the human heart several feet away from the body.
So when I am feeling intense frustration or profound grief, my physical body is literally vibrating at a different spectral frequency. I am broadcasting a physical wave.
Without question. Your internal state generates an electromagnetic field that radiates in a profound radius around your physical structure. It extends outward, continuously interacting with the ambient fields of the environment and the fields of other humans.
This means your energetic ripple, the absolute truth of your internal state, arrives in a room long before you even open your mouth to speak.
Yes, this explains the mechanics behind human intuition and the concept of reading the room.
We have all had that highly specific experience. A colleague walks into a room and they have this Huge, meticulously forced smile on their face. They sit down, their posture is perfect, and they say, I am doing perfectly fine.
And your nervous system just looks at them and registers, absolutely not.
Yes, you can viscerally feel the distress radiating off them. Their verbal output is saying fine, but their energetic ripple is screaming in absolute chaotic agony.
You are perceiving the constructive and destructive interference of their electromagnetic field interacting with yours. The solitary spark of their conscious mind is highly controlling the muscles in their face.
But the endless tide of their autonomic nervous system is broadcasting a chaotic, distressed frequency.
The electromagnetic field never lies. It cannot be faked by willpower. And humans possess incredibly sensitive biological receivers for these frequencies.
So if we are constantly broadcasting these ripples, what does this mean for the repeating loop of circumstance? Are you saying that our physical reality, the specific job opportunities, the specific partners we encounter, are actually magnetically responding to these unconscious ripples?
That is the mechanical, physical truth of the universe as observed through this lens. The universe does not possess a mechanism to judge your conscious desires. It simply operates on the laws of resonance. It matches your frequency.
So if your endless tide was programmed during the dawn of your cycle to fundamentally believe that relationships are inherently chaotic and painful,
Your nervous system is continuously dropping the chaos and pain stone into your energetic ocean. You are broadcasting a highly specific, measurable ripple of relational instability.
and as you move through the physical world, that ripple interacts with the fields of billions of other people.
And through the mechanics of energetic resonance, it magnetically draws back to you the specific people and events that perfectly align with and validate that exact frequency.
Wow. So the new partner we mentioned at the very beginning of this exploration, the one with a different appearance, but the exact same toxic behavior. They weren't a random accident.
They were drawn to the ripple. They were an absolute, perfect, energetic match to the broadcast.
Their own unresolved trauma recognized the familiar frequency of your broadcast.
Exactly. The universe simply facilitated the connection, delivering exactly what your nervous system was demanding to experience based on its foundational coding. The external world is acting as a flawless mirror to your internal state.
Okay, this is staggering, but I want to take this a step further because the research shows it's not just the external world that is responding to these energetic ripples. It is our own internal cellular biology.
This is the bridge between abstract psychological thoughts and literal physical health.
Yes, let's unpack the mechanics of this because the conventional view is that our genes dictate our health. We are taught that DNA is destiny.
But the field of epigenetics completely shatters that.
The idea that my abstract perception of reality is literally altering how my physical cells construct themselves is revolutionary.
To understand this biological mechanism, we can examine a highly profound observation involving stem cells. Imagine a solitary, unspecialized unit. This single cell is placed in an artificial environment and allowed to naturally multiply into a vast multitude.
So they are completely 100% genetically identical.
Yes.
Zero genetic variation.
Exactly. Now, the observer systematically separates this identical population into three entirely different physical environments. In biological terms, this environment is called a culture medium.
It is the liquid solution that bathes the cells, right?
Yes, providing the necessary nutrients and the chemical signals for life. So we have three separate, isolated dishes, each containing a vast constellation of genetically identical cells.
3 different micro-universes for these identical cells to live in.
The observer then takes a highly deliberate action. They drastically change the chemical composition of the culture medium in each of the three environments. The genes remain untouched, but the environment is altered.
What happens to the cells?
In the first environment, the cells respond to the specific chemical signals by becoming structural foundation. They physically develop into bone cells.
Okay, and the second?
In the second environment, a completely different chemical composition is introduced, and those exact same genetically identical cells transform into kinetic fibers. They develop into muscle cells.
And the third?
In the third environment, yet another chemical variation is introduced, and the cells transform into energy storage. They become fat cells.
Let me just emphasize the magnitude of this for the listener. The cells possess the exact same genetic code. The DNA blueprint didn't mutate or change, but their entire physical destiny completely changed, simply because the liquid surrounding them changed.
The environment dictates the fate of the cell. The genetic blueprint is merely a list of potentials. It is not the contractor. The culture medium is the contractor that commands how that genetic potential is actually expressed.
The environment reads the genes.
Now, we must scale this microscopic observation up to the macro level of the human body. You are a highly organized constellation of trillions of individual cells. What is the equivalent culture medium that continuously bathes every single cell in your physical form?
It's our blood. Our bloodstream is the ultimate culture medium.
Precisely. Your blood provides the nutrients, but more importantly, it provides the complex chemical signals to every cell, and what regulates the chemical composition of your blood.
Our nervous system.
Yes. Your brain and nervous system interpret your psychological perception of reality, and in a fraction of a second, translate that abstract perception into literal chemical messengers, hormones, neuropeptides, and release them directly into your blood.
Okay, here is the absolute aha moment of this entire framework. If I am walking around constantly perceiving the world as hostile because I am still operating on the endless tide programming from the dawn of my cycle, my prefrontal cortex might know I'm sitting safely at a desk, but my limbic system interprets my daily life as a constant mortal threat.
It doesn't know the difference between a bad email and a physical predator.
Right. So in response, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which signals the adrenal glands, to flood my blood with the chemistry of stress. High cortisol adrenaline. I am literally marinating my vast constellation of cells in a highly toxic culture medium.
You are chemically commanding your own physical biology to shut down its growth and repair functions and prepare for a physical war that doesn't actually exist outside your own mind.
That is a completely self-fulfilling biological prophecy. The mind perceives an abstract threat. The brain translates that into blood chemistry. The cells react to the toxic blood by contracting, and the body experiences the physical reality of tension and fatigue.
Which then sends a signal back up the vagus nerve to the brain saying, look at all of this physical distress, things really are terrible, keep stressing. It's a closed, deteriorating loop.
And this leads us to perhaps the most critical mechanism by which we perpetuate this loop. If our abstract thoughts are the primary architects of our internal cellular chemistry and our external magnetic draw, we must recognize the most potent instrument we possess for shaping those thoughts.
We must thoroughly understand the architecture of sound.
You were talking about the mechanics of spoken words.
I am. In our modern paradigm, we have a dangerous tendency to view spoken language simply as a benign tool for data transfer.
Just a way to pass information.
Yes, but we must realize that words are not merely symbolic placeholders. Spoken words are literal, physical, measurable acoustic frequencies. When you speak, you're generating somatic vibrations that travel through the air, yes, but far more importantly, they reverberate through the fluid and bone of your own physical structure.
The tongue is the most dangerous weapon and the most powerful creative tool you possess.
A weapon, yes, because we are actively doing biological and physical damage with it.
We are constantly doing profound damage, mostly out of deep ignorance.
Speaking without conscious, deliberate awareness is tantamount to casting a curse upon one's own neurobiology. When we engage in chronic complaining, continuously reciting our limitations, we are actively engaging in what can only be described mechanically as chaos magic.
Chaos magic. I love that framing because it perfectly describes the reckless way we throw words around. We just open our mouths and let the automated, anxious, endless tide spill out, not realizing we are actively programming our reality.
There is a profound reason why, throughout the passage of eras, ancient wisdom traditions demanded extended periods of absolute silence from their initiates. We are talking about years spent in total, unbroken silence.
It wasn't just to be peaceful.
No, it was a highly calculated requirement designed to completely halt the internal destruction caused by careless acoustic frequencies. Until an initiate developed the discipline to understand the biological cost of a single spoken word, they were strictly forbidden from generating them.
That level of discipline is completely foreign to our modern society. We live in an era where we are practically encouraged to narrate every fleeting irritation. But let's ground this in the neuroscience. What is the actual filtration mechanism in the brain that makes our words so dangerous?
We must look at the brain's ultimate data filtration system. It is a network of neurons called the reticular activating system.
The RAS.
Yes. At any given moment, your physical senses are bombarded by an endless tide of raw data, millions of bits of visual, auditory, and tactile information. If your conscious mind attempted to process all of it simultaneously, the computational overload would cause a catastrophic systemic collapse instantly.
So the filtration system acts as the ultimate gatekeeper.
Its entire function is to objectively scan this massive ocean of data and only allow specific information to pass into your conscious awareness. Specifically, information that proves your deeply declared identity is true.
Okay, let's give the listener a highly relatable analogy for this. A lot of people are familiar with the cocktail party effect, right? You are in a massive, crowded room. Hundreds of people are talking simultaneously. There is music
A
playing.
wall of white noise.
Exactly.
Mm.
You cannot distinguish a single conversation happening 10 feet away. Your reticular activating system is filtering it all out as irrelevant data to save processing power. But suddenly, from completely across the room, amid all that chaos, someone softly speaks your name.
And instantly, your brain snaps to attention.
You hear your name with absolute clarity. The acoustic volume of your name wasn't any louder than the surrounding noise, but because your name is the most deeply programmed component of your identity, your internal filter has a permanent command. This specific acoustic pattern is highly important to our survival.
So the filter instantly bypasses the noise, extracts that specific frequency from the endless tide of data, and forces your conscious mind to focus on it.
The filtration system is utterly objective. It does not possess the capacity to care whether the command is beneficial to your happiness. It only cares about alignment with the declared identity.
Now, apply this immense neurological mechanism not just to hearing your name, but to the chaotic frequencies you broadcast through careless, repetitive speech.
Okay, let me push back here, or, play devil's advocate. Because our current societal culture has a very strong narrative about this. We are constantly told by pop psychology how healthy it is to vent, to get it off our chest.
Yes, the conventional wisdom.
It states that if you experience anger or frustration and you hold those emotions in, they will fester and physically poison you. So if I have a genuinely terrible day, shouldn't I call a friend on the drive home and passionately talk about how awful my boss is? Isn't that a necessary release of pressure?
The modern concept of venting as a healthy release is perhaps one of the most biologically destructive misunderstandings of human mechanics in existence.
Wait, really? That flies in the face of almost everything we were taught. Why is it destructive?
Because of the precise neurological filtration system we just discussed. When you vent, you are not simply opening a valve and releasing harmless pressure into the ether. You are utilizing the immense power of acoustic frequency to broadcast a chaotic command.
You are declaring an identity of victimization.
Loudly, forcefully, and repeatedly. When you sit with a friend, raise your heart rate, flood your blood with cortisol, and passionately say, "I always get passed over for promotions. The system is entirely rigged against me," you may feel a temporary rush of validating emotion.
Because you are discharging energy.
But you must look at what you have mechanically done to your neural architecture.
I've just given the bouncer at the club brand new VIP list of things to look for.
You have given your subconscious filter an absolute non-negotiable command. Your reticular activating system objectively responds. Message received. Our current identity is one who is perpetually passed over. We will now actively blind the conscious mind to all subtle opportunities for advancement.
Because noticing those positive variables would contradict the declared identity we must protect. Wow. So by venting about the bad boss to feel better in the short term, I am literally neurologically blinding myself to the escape route in the long term. My brain will filter out the job posting that could save me because it doesn't align with the "I am trapped" identity I just screamed into existence.
You are locking the door of your own psychological cage from the inside. By declaring the curse, you are commanding your biological reality to only show you further evidence of disrespect.
We think we are just harmlessly describing our reality to a friend, but we are actually prescribing our reality. We are reading the menu, complaining about the food, and inadvertently ordering more of the exact same meal.
Precisely. And this sobering realization brings us to the ultimate point of transformation in this exploration. If our past programming is dictating our subconscious tide, if our perception is altering our cellular culture medium, and if our careless words are continuously reinforcing the loop, how do we break the mechanism?
Where is the actual leverage point to change the trajectory?
It begins with fundamentally understanding where our actual power resides.
And where is that? Because clearly, it is not in endlessly analyzing the past.
The human ego is endlessly fascinated by the past and chronically obsessed with controlling the future. But the past is a mathematically unalterable artifact.
Right.
The ego's desperate desire to control the past, to endlessly psychoanalyze the origin of the trauma, to wait for an apology from a caregiver that will never mathematically arrive, this is the fundamental root of all human suffering and wasted energy.
True power exists exclusively in the eternal present.
Yes. There is this profound, almost poetic wisdom from the distant past that perfectly encapsulates the physics of this. It is the concept that the moving finger of time writes, and having written, it continuously moves on.
And once that line of reality is written into history, no amount of sorrow, no amount of brilliant intellectual analysis can lure that finger back to erase even half a line.
Not all your tears, not all your therapy can wash out a single word of what has already physically occurred.
A beautiful, brutal, and entirely necessary truth. The ego derives its identity from separation and pain. But the true energetic self recognizes that the narrative of the past is entirely dead.
The only variable that dictates your physical biology and your external magnetic draw is the specific frequency you are emitting now, in this exact singular moment.
Okay, so practically speaking, how does the listener actually harness this power of the present moment? We have established that the subconscious tide is a massive river, and our conscious spark is incredibly tiny. How do we reprogram the navigation system without fighting it?
By strategically utilizing the critical transition windows of the human biological cycle, there are two distinct, highly vulnerable phases during your daily rotation where the solitary spark of the conscious mind naturally quiets down.
The descent into sleep and the slow ascent into waking.
Yes. During these specific neurological transitions, the thick protective firewall of the conscious mind becomes highly porous. The endless tide of the subconscious is suddenly laid bare, entirely vulnerable, and open to direct programming without the resistance of the prefrontal cortex arguing about logic.
So, as I am physically falling asleep, the bouncer at the club goes on break, and I have direct, unfiltered access to the control room.
Exactly. And this is the precise moment where we must utilize the most potent, authoritative combination of frequencies in the human language, the phrase, I am.
I am. Two incredibly tiny words, but structurally, they carry the absolute weight of the universe.
Because whatever follows those two words acts as an absolute executable command to the entire nervous system. It dictates the chemical composition of the culture medium bathing your cells, and it sets the precise electromagnetic coordinates for your external magnetic draw.
When you are descending into sleep, your conscious mind isn't looking at your bank account or your frustrating partner.
No, the resistance is down. If you consciously choose in that highly vulnerable window to declare an I am identity of peace, of abundance, or of cellular healing, you are planting a profoundly powerful, unopposed seed in the incredibly fertile soil of the subconscious.
It is exactly like the darkroom metaphor in photography. Think of the subconscious mind during the human sleep cycle as a master photographer's darkroom.
Let's expand on that.
Throughout your waking hours, you spend the whole day taking sensory snapshots of your reality. Unfortunately, most people go to sleep tightly, holding on to the snapshots of their anxieties. They run through the mental loop. I am completely stressed. I am broke. I am lonely.
They literally hand those negative exposure films to the subconscious just as the conscious mind shuts down.
And for the entire cycle of physical rest, for hours upon hours, the subconscious goes to work in the darkroom, meticulously developing those negatives into the physical, biological, and energetic reality you will walk into the next morning.
It prepares the cortisol. It tunes the reticular activating system to look for more stress.
But if, right before sleep, you deliberately hand the subconscious a completely new negative, if you feel the emotion and declare, I am deeply secure, I am profoundly loved, I am entirely capable, it spends the entire night developing that new reality instead.
That is a mechanically perfect analogy. You are utilizing the immense automated processing power of the endless tide to work for your expansion rather than against it. You are bypassing the exhausting metabolic friction of the conscious mind.
And furthermore, when you ascend into waking in that brief twilight before the ego can rush in and remind you of all your earthly problems, you reinforce the new identity.
You establish the frequency of the new culture medium, flooding the body with the chemistry of coherence before your feet even touch the physical floor.
This is how you fundamentally dismantle the repeating loop. You don't waste your energy fighting the old boss or psychoanalyzing the ex-partner. You change the internal frequency that magnetically attracted that specific dynamic in the first place.
It represents a profound shift in personal responsibility.
So let's take a macro look at the incredible journey we've navigated in our session today. We started by looking at a person, maybe you, feeling completely trapped, exhausted, and bewildered by a repeating cycle of bad luck.
The toxic partners with different faces, the terrible corporate environments.
And what we have discovered by unpacking the neurobiology and the physics is that there is absolutely no such thing as random luck in these cycles. There is no chaotic, vindictive universe punishing you.
There is only a highly efficient, perfectly objective biological and energetic machine, a machine that is simply reflecting your deepest unspoken identity right back to you.
We learned that the tiny spark of our conscious desires is constantly fighting against the massive tide of our early survival programming. We realized that our physical bodies are not solid objects, but essentially vast oceans of energy, radiating an electromagnetic truth that the external universe must mathematically answer.
We saw how our psychological perception of the world literally changes the chemical bath of our own cells.
We unpacked the terrifying reality that complaining and venting are not healthy releases, but chaotic acoustic commands that blind our neurological filters to actual solutions.
And finally, we found the absolute key to rewriting the system.
Bypassing the friction of the ego, abandoning the unalterable past, and using the twilight transitions of sleep to plant a new I am command directly into the control room of the subconscious. It permanently moves you from being a victim of circumstance to being the undeniable, conscious architect of your reality.
Which leaves us with a final, vital perspective to consider as you step back into the flow of your daily existence. We want to leave you with a lingering, highly practical concept to mull over.
What is that final thought?
The next time you find yourself entirely frustrated by an encounter with a difficult person, or when a sudden, highly familiar obstacle blocks your path, pause. Do not immediately react with the solitary spark of your conscious anger, or fall into the endless tide of victimization.
What should we do instead?
Ask yourself a radical, transformative question. What if this event is not an attack from the outside world at all? What if this person, this specific frustration, is actually a highly accurate, perfectly placed mirror positioned deliberately in your path by your own energetic resonance to show you an internal frequency you didn't even realize you were still broadcasting?